Murder solved too late, the chilling cold case of Janet Couture. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. The rain came down in sheets that night, thick, cold, and relentless. It was the kind of rain that drowned sound, swallowed light, and made even familiar streets feel foreign. Janet Couture's headlights cut through the mist as her car rolled down County Road 9. It was 11:47 p.m. The world around her was still, the kind of stillness that comes before something bad happens. She wasn't supposed to be out that late. Not in a town like Maple Hollow, Maine. A place that looked peaceful on postcards, but had secrets buried beneath the pine trees. Janet was 37. A nurse, a mother of two, known for her calm smile and gentle voice at St. Mary's Hospital. But lately, that smile had been fading. Her friends said she'd been distant. Her co-workers said she jumped at every noise. Her sister, Holly, said Janet had started locking her bedroom door at night, even when she was alone. She never said why. That night, Janet's phone buzzed. One new message. No name, just a number she didn't recognize. "You shouldn't have told anyone." Her eyes widened. Her fingers trembled on the steering wheel. She didn't reply. Instead, she glanced at the rearview mirror. Headlights, two of them, bright, too close. Her pulse began to race. The car behind her didn't pass. It followed, mile after mile. When she turned down an empty stretch of road, it turned too. Janet's breathing quickened. Her hands tightened on the wheel. She whispered, "Not again." The rain hammered harder. The wipers squeaked. The headlights behind her grew closer, blinding her. And then they vanished. Gone. She slowed her car, heart pounding. Nothing but rain, trees, darkness. She exhaled. Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe she was just paranoid. But when she looked up, something was standing in the road. A man, tall, motionless, soaked in rain. Janet slammed the brakes. Her tires skidded on wet asphalt. The car swerved sideways. She screamed. The world spun and everything went black. The next morning, a jogger found her car half in a ditch, driver's side door open, engine still warm. Janet Couture was gone. No blood, no footprints, no signs of a struggle. Just her phone, cracked on the driver's seat, and the last text still glowing faintly through the rainwater. "You shouldn't have told anyone." Detective Raymond Beckett was the first on scene. A man in his 50s, gray at the temples, tired eyes that had seen too much. He crouched beside the car, his breath fogging in the cold air. Something didn't sit right. No forced entry, no drag marks, no tire prints except her own. Just absence, like she'd dissolved into the night. At the station, Beckett spread Janet's life across a corkboard. Photos, receipts, a timeline. Her co-workers said she'd left her shift around 10:45 p.m. Her phone pinged once near Pine Lake, then went dark. Her ex-husband, Mark Couture, was the first suspect. They divorced 2 years earlier after allegations of emotional abuse. But he had an alibi. Home security footage showed him asleep at 11:30. Still, Beckett couldn't shake the feeling that Janet's disappearance was personal. People don't just vanish like that. Days passed. Search parties combed the woods. Helicopters circled overhead. Divers searched the lake. Nothing. Not a single trace. Then, a week later, a fisherman found something floating near the lake's edge. A white nurse's badge, cracked, the name barely legible under dried mud. Janet Couture RN. That was the first clue. But Beckett knew first clues rarely told the truth. They led you into traps. At home, Janet's sister, Holly, sat in the dark, clutching her phone. She couldn't stop replaying Janet's last voicemail. "Holly, if anything happens to me, check the blue box under my bed. Don't tell anyone, not even the police." Her hands shook as she knelt beside Janet's bed that night. She reached underneath. There it was, a small, dusty box with a faded ribbon around it. Inside, a stack of letters, all postmarked from a return address she didn't recognize, and a flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop. A folder opened automatically. Dozens of photos, dates, faces, each labeled with a single word, victim. Her blood ran cold. At the bottom of the folder, a file named Z Project Confidential. Before she could open it, her laptop screen flickered, then went black. A single message appeared in white text. You were warned. By morning, Holly was gone too. Her car was found at the same lake where Janet's badge surfaced. The driver's door wide open, keys still in the ignition. Detective Beckett stared at the scene, the cold biting at his neck. 2 women, 2 cars, same location, no bodies. Something about this wasn't random. He looked out at the fog rising from the lake and muttered under his breath, "This isn't a disappearance. This is a message." That night, he returned to his office and replayed Janet's final phone call to dispatch. Faint, muffled voice, hard to make out. He amplified the audio, a whisper, trembling and terrified. "They know what I found. They're coming for me." Then silence, and a sound that made his stomach twist, the soft, rhythmic tapping of metal against glass. Tap, 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 like someone knocking from inside the car. As Beckett leaned back in his chair, the office lights flickered. He thought it was the storm outside, until he looked at his desk. A small envelope sat there. No one had been in the room. Inside, a photo. Janet, standing by her car, smiling. But in the reflection of her driver's window, a man was standing behind her. And in the corner of the photo, handwritten in ink. She found out too late. The clock in Detective Beckett's office read 3:17 a.m. Rain tapped against the window. The air smelled of stale coffee and paper. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. Janet Couture's face stared back at him from the board on the wall. Pinned above her sister Holly's photo. 2 disappearances. 7 days apart. Same lake. Same eerie silence. Beckett took a slow sip of coffee and muttered, "There's no such thing as coincidence." But deep down, he felt something worse. This wasn't a case anymore. It was a pattern. At 4 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Beckett." Static crackled through the speaker. Then a voice. Low. Urgent. Female. "Detective, stop looking. They see everything." He sat up straight. "Who is this?" "You're not listening, they'll come for you too." Just like. The line went dead. Beckett's heart pounded. He called the number back. Disconnected. He exhaled, rubbed his temples, and turned back to the corkboard. Janet. Holly. Pine Lake. The text message. The flash drive. The word they. Who was they? By morning, the sky had cleared. The town of Maple Hollow carried on like nothing had happened. Kids walking to school, coffee shops humming, the local paper running another story about the Lake Sisters. But Beckett knew better. He drove out to Pine Lake, where both cars had been found. The sun was rising now, pale light spilling over the water. A single patrol car waited by the edge. A young officer stood beside it. "Morning, detective," the officer said. "You're not gonna believe this." Beckett followed his gaze. Something had washed up overnight. A duffel bag, soaked, half buried in mud. Inside, women's clothes, a torn photograph, and a sealed envelope marked Zizian Trust, private. Beckett frowned. "What the hell is that?" The officer shrugged. "Never heard of it." He slipped on gloves and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Clean. A list of names and dates. Each name had a red circle drawn around it. And next to one of them, the word eliminated. The first name on the list, Janet Couture. The second, Holly Couture. And the third, Raymond Beckett. His chest tightened. He folded the paper, slipped it into his coat, and said nothing. Back at the precinct, Beckett dug into the name Zizian Trust. First, nothing. Then a hit. A nonprofit organization dissolved 10 years earlier after accusations of tax fraud and unethical experiments on psychiatric patients. Their slogan, "Purity through Enlightenment." He frowned. The group's founder was listed as Dr. Ezra Zizian, a psychologist turned spiritual leader who vanished in 2009 after a federal investigation. No body, no arrest, just gone. The deeper Beckett searched, the darker it got. The Zizian Trust wasn't just a nonprofit, it was a cult. They preached transcendence, rebirth, and the cleansing of corrupted souls. Dozens of missing people had once been members. Most were women, and all of them had one thing in common: they tried to leave. Later that afternoon, Beckett drove to Janet's hospital. He met with Dr. Monroe, the hospital administrator, a thin man with a nervous smile. She worked nights mostly, Monroe said. Quiet woman, always kept to herself after the breakdown. Beckett raised an eyebrow. Breakdown? Monroe shifted uncomfortably. She filed a complaint against a patient last year, claimed he was following her home. We reviewed the tapes, nothing. He was admitted under a fake name. That's all I know. Beckett leaned in. What name? Monroe swallowed hard. Ezra Z. Just that. No last name. Beckett froze. Ezra Zizian. It couldn't be. That night, Beckett sat in his car outside Janet's home. The lights were off. The house was quiet. He stepped out, his flashlight cutting across the front yard. The grass was wet. The air smelled of pine and rain. As he reached the porch, the floorboards creaked. Something rustled inside. He drew his gun. Police! Anyone in there? No answer. He pushed the door open. The living room was dark. Then he saw it on the wall above the fireplace. A symbol painted in red. A circle. Inside it, an eye. Underneath, a single word scrawled in dripping letters. Awakened. He felt his skin crawl. Footsteps sounded upstairs. He moved quietly, gun raised, heart pounding. At the top of the stairs, he found a door slightly open. Inside Janet's bedroom, the curtains fluttered in the breeze. The window was cracked open, and on the bed lay a cassette tape labeled Listen. He hesitated, then played it. Janet's voice filled the room, shaky, whispering, "If you're hearing this, I'm probably dead. They call themselves the Zizians. They say they cleanse the weak. But it's a lie. They take people. They experiment. They record everything. He told me I was chosen, that I had to repent. I tried to expose them, but I think Holly's next." Her breathing quickened. "If anyone finds this, go to the old Zizian retreat on Ashworth Road. The truth's there. The others are still trapped." Static. Then a whisper. A male voice, barely audible. "You shouldn't have told anyone." The tape clicked off. Beckett's blood ran cold. By dawn, he was already driving to Ashworth Road. It was 12 miles outside town, a place most locals avoided. The retreat sat at the edge of a forest. For decaying cabins, boarded windows, a collapsed chapel, and a faded sign that read, "Zizian Retreat Rebirth Awaits." The gate was chained shut. Beckett cut through it. Every step he took, the woods seemed to whisper. Inside one of the cabins, he found broken furniture, old medical equipment, and files scattered across the floor. Names, dates, photos, every one of them marked with a number. He opened a folder labeled Subject 19. A photo fell out. Janet. He turned the page. A note was stapled inside. Patient shows signs of resistance. Recommended procedure: purification. Beckett's flashlight flickered. Then he heard it, footsteps outside. He froze. "Hello?" he called out. No answer. He stepped out slowly. The air was still. Then a voice behind him. "Detective Beckett." He spun around. A tall man stood in the doorway of the chapel. Bald head, gray suit, calm eyes. Beckett recognized the face instantly from an old FBI file photo. Dr. Ezra Zizian. Alive. Beckett raised his gun. "Hands where I can see them." Zizian smiled faintly. "You've come far. But you shouldn't have." "Where are they?" Beckett snapped. "Gone. Freed," Zizian said softly. "The weak cling to their pain. I helped them let go." "You killed them." Zizian tilted his head. "I purified them." Beckett's finger tightened on the trigger. "Why Janet? Why Holly?" Zizian stepped closer. "They saw what others couldn't. The world is a sickness, detective. I simply offered them a cure." Beckett's voice hardened. You brainwashed them. Zizian's eyes darkened. No, I enlightened them. And soon you'll understand too. Suddenly a sound. A door slamming behind Beckett. He turned. Shadows moved through the trees. Figures, cloaked, silent, surrounding him. A dozen of them, each wearing a symbol, a circle with an eye, stitched over their chests. Beckett's breath caught. Zizian's voice echoed softly. Welcome, detective, to the awakening. He fired a warning shot into the air. Back off. The cloaked figures didn't flinch. They began chanting low, rhythmic, hypnotic. The same phrase over and over. Purity, through suffering. Zizian raised his hands. Do you hear it? The sound of salvation. Beckett aimed at his chest. This ends tonight. Zizian smiled. It never ends. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Drip, drip, drip. Detective Beckett's eyes fluttered open. The sound came from somewhere above him. A slow, steady leak tapping against concrete. He was lying on a damp floor. His wrists were tied. His head throbbed. The air smelled of rust and bleach. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then the memory hit him like a wave. The chapel. The chanting. Zizian's face. Janet. He forced himself upright. The basement was larger than he'd realized. Half submerged in shadows. The walls lined with rusted pipes and flickering bulbs. In the corner stood the tank. Janet's body still floated inside, motionless now, her pale hair waving in the water like white ribbons. A lump formed in his throat. He whispered, I'm sorry, Janet. Then he noticed something, a faint red light blinking near the tank's base. Camera. He cursed under his breath. They were watching. He strained against the ropes. They were tight but old, wet. The fibers started to give under his twisting. Each pull burned his wrists, but he didn't stop. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the rope snapped. He staggered to his feet, dizzy, weak, but free. That's when he saw the door, heavy steel, half-rusted, with a small viewing slot near the top. He tried it, locked. Then, from somewhere beyond it, came a faint voice. Detective, is that you? He froze. That voice? He knew it. He moved closer to the door. Who's there? It's Holly. Beckett's pulse quickened. Holly Couture? You're alive. I think so. They've kept me here for days. Please, you have to get me out. He looked around desperately. No keys, no tools, only an old pipe and broken glass. He grabbed the pipe and slammed it against the lock. Once, twice, the metal groaned. Finally, clang. The latch gave way. He pushed the door open. Holly stumbled out, pale, trembling, her hair tangled, eyes hollow. She looked half dead. She collapsed into his arms, whispering, They said I'd see my sister again. They said she was waiting for me. Beckett steadied her. We're getting out of here. But she shook her head. They won't let us. They crept through the narrow hallway. The flickering lights made shadows dance across the walls. Every few steps, Holly flinched, like she was hearing things that weren't there. Beckett whispered, How many of them are here? She hesitated. Dozens. Maybe more. They live underground now. They say the world isn't clean enough. He frowned. And Zizian? Her eyes darkened. He calls himself the vessel. They worship him. He says death is just another door. Beckett clenched his jaw. Then let's slam that door shut. They found a stairwell leading upward. At the top, a faint glow of daylight seeping through cracks in the boards. Beckett pushed against the door, creaked open. The air hit him like freedom. Cold, fresh, alive. They were outside in the woods behind the retreat. The forest was silent, except for the sound of wind through the trees. He turned to Holly. Can you walk? She nodded weakly. They began moving fast, staying low, sticking to shadows. Beckett's mind raced. They needed a car, a phone, anything. Then Holly stopped. Wait, do you hear that? He paused. A faint hum, then chanting. Purity. Through. Suffering. It was coming from all directions. The forest wasn't empty. They were surrounded. Figures emerged from the trees. 10, maybe 12, dressed in black robes, their faces hidden behind masks. One stepped forward. A woman's voice. The detective and the doubter. You were warned. Beckett raised the pipe, his muscles tensing. Stay back. The woman tilted her head. You cannot fight truth. Holly whispered. That's her, Sister Marin. Zizian's second. The woman smiled beneath the mask. The doctor has prepared a place for you both. Then she snapped her fingers. Torches lit up around the clearing, encircling them in orange light. Zizian appeared at the far edge of the ring, calm, composed, dressed in white while everyone else wore black. He spread his arms. Do you feel it, detective? The air trembles with revelation. Beckett glared. You murdered them. All those women. Zizian's eyes glowed with something close to pity. Murder? No, I delivered them. He turned to the followers. Show them purity. They surged forward. Beckett swung the pipe, striking the first figure in the face. Holly screamed. Another lunged at him. He hit the man hard, dropped him. But there were too many. Hands grabbed his shoulders, his arms. Someone yanked his weapon away. He fell to the ground, the mob closing in. Zizian's voice echoed. Do not fear, detective. Pain is only the beginning. Suddenly, headlights blazed through the trees. Tires screeched. A truck barreled into the clearing, scattering the followers like leaves. A voice shouted, Police! Drop your weapons. It was Officer Callahan, Beckett's partner. Beckett felt relief flood through him as Callahan fired a warning shot into the air. The cult members fled into the woods like shadows dissolving into mist. When the smoke cleared, only Beckett, Holly, and the wounded remained. But Zizian was gone. Later, in the back of the ambulance, Holly sat wrapped in a blanket, trembling. Beckett leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion etched across his face. Callahan approached. We swept the area, found their files, their ritual rooms. But the main guy, Zizian, vanished. Beckett nodded grimly. He'll surface. Men like him always do. Callahan lowered his voice. We also found something else. You might want to see it. He handed Beckett a folder. Inside, printed photos from the retreat. One photo froze him in place. A group of followers standing beside Zizian. But behind them, tied to a chair, gagged Janet Couture. Alive. The photo was dated 2 days after her disappearance. Beckett's stomach turned. She didn't die right away. Callahan nodded. We think she tried to escape. Maybe she found something she wasn't supposed to. Beckett flipped through the other pages. There, a piece of paper clipped to the back. A list titled, The Purification Candidates. The first name, Janet Couture. The second, Holly Couture. The third, Raymond Beckett. He looked up, face pale. He's still hunting us. 2 days later, Beckett returned to the station. The case had made national headlines. Cult bunker discovered in Maine woods. Police rescue survivor after 12 days in captivity. But the truth was worse than the headlines. Zizian's network ran deep money trails, shell companies, fake charities, even police contacts. Every file Beckett opened made his chest tighten. This wasn't one cult. It was a web. And Janet, she'd stumbled into the center of it. At midnight, he sat alone in his office. The walls were covered in case photos. Janet, Holly, the retreat, the tank. He replayed the cassette on his desk again, Janet's final recording. If anyone finds this, he's still here. He's everywhere. Don't trust anyone who calls you chosen. The tape clicked off. Then his phone buzzed. A text message. Unknown number. You were warned, detective. Attached, a photo of his apartment building. Taken minutes ago. Beckett froze. His pulse pounded. He grabbed his gun and rushed out of the office. The streets were quiet. His car tires splashed through puddles as he pulled up to his complex. The lights were off in his apartment, but his front door was ajar. He crept inside, gun raised. The air was cold, still. Then a soft whisper. Detective Beckett. He turned. A figure stood by the window, cloaked, unmoving. Beckett aimed. Don't move, the figure chuckled. Always the hero. The call came on a cold November morning. Detective Rachel Moore was halfway through her second cup of coffee when her desk phone rang. Moore, she answered, distracted, eyes still on the stack of unsolved files beside her. Detective, this is Dr. Patel, from the State Lab. You're going to want to sit down. Her pulse slowed. Her grip on the mug tightened. Every detective knows that tone. It's the sound of a ghost coming back to life. She's Saturday, you have something? Dr. Patel hesitated for a second, then said quietly, we finally got a hit. The partial DNA from Janet Couture's fingernails. It just matched someone. Rachel's heart stopped. After 23 years, the case that had gone silent had just spoken. The file had haunted Rachel since her first year on the force. Back then, she was the rookie, eager, naive, still believing every mystery had an answer. Janet Couture's file was one of the cold ones. A young mother found strangled in her small Vermont home in 1999. No forced entry, no witnesses, no motive. The scene told a story, but only half of it. A wine glass shattered near the kitchen table. A chair tipped over. One strand of blonde hair clenched in Janet's hand. And scratches, deep, defensive wounds across her fingers. Rachel had stared at the photos more times than she could count. Each time, the same question haunted her. Who had she been fighting? Now, after decades of silence, DNA technology had caught up with time. By noon, Rachel was in the lab. The air smelled of coffee and chemicals. Dr. Patel pulled up the screen. The profile glowed on the monitor. Letters, numbers, lines, cold science. But behind it, a life. It's a familial match, he explained. Not a direct hit, but it's close. Very close. Rachel leaned in. Who? Patel exhaled slowly. His name is Thomas Brantley, 42 years old. Arrested last year for aggravated assault in Maine. His DNA flagged a partial match to the sample from Couture's scene. Rachel's brows furrowed. Brantley? Never heard of him. He wouldn't have been in any database back then, Patel said. But his father might have been. And just like that, Rachel's blood ran cold. The name Brantley unlocked something buried in her memory. She flipped open the old case file. There it was, a note from the original detective. Neighbor interviewed, Harold Brantley, mid-50s, lives 2 houses down. Claims he didn't hear or see anything. 2 houses down. Harold Brantley had lived next door to Janet Couture the night she was killed. Rachel felt a chill crawl down her spine. Couldn't be a coincidence. Get me everything on Harold Brantley, she said. By evening, the file was on her desk. Harold had died in 2015. Retired electrician. No criminal record. Lived alone most of his life. But something caught Rachel's eye. His son, Thomas, had been 16 when Janet died. 16. She leaned back, connecting invisible dots. Teenage boy. A quiet neighborhood. A lonely young mother. Her mind flashed through the evidence again. No forced entry, the wine glass, the defensive scratches. Janet knew whoever killed her. Rachel whispered under her breath. It wasn't the father. It was the son. The next morning, she was on a flight to Maine. Thomas Brantley's mugshot stared back from her phone screen. Dark eyes, hard expression. A man with decades of anger built into his face. She met him in a small interview room, the kind that smells of sweat and old coffee. He sat with his arms crossed, tattoos peeking out from his sleeves. Detective Moore, he said dryly. To what do I owe the pleasure? She slid a photo across the table. Janet Couture, smiling, frozen in time. Do you recognize her? He looked at the picture for a second too long. No, he said. Should I? Rachel leaned forward. You lived 2 houses down. You were 16. Your father was interviewed. A flicker. His jaw tightened. Lot of people lived on that street, he muttered. She studied him, the twitch in his cheek, the way his fingers tapped against the table. He was lying. She pulled out another photo, a close-up of the scratches on Janet's hand. These marks, they came from a fight. Her killer struggled. She fought hard. We found DNA under her nails. It's a partial match to you. For the first time, his eyes widened. Then he smirked. Partial? That means you got nothing. Rachel smiled faintly. Maybe. Or maybe it's enough to reopen the case. Enough to test your father's old belongings. His hairbrush, his toothbrush, his blood work. Anything that links back to you and to her. He shifted uncomfortably now. Why drag this up? He snapped. It was decades ago. She's gone. Rachel's voice turned cold. And someone made sure of that. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. The case had crawled under her skin. Something didn't sit right. If Thomas had done it, why the partial match? Why not full? Was the father involved too? Or was there something darker? She reopened the old notes. The original detective had written something curious. Brantley home was dark when we knocked. Neighbor says father worked nights. Son seen walking home around 10 p.m. The estimated time of death for Janet Couture, between 9:30 and 10:15 p.m. Her hand froze. He'd been there. She felt her stomach twist. Rachel got a warrant for Harold Brantley's old belongings. It took weeks, the process, the paperwork, the waiting. Then one day, another call. Dr. Patel again. Rachel, we have confirmation. The DNA from the crime scene doesn't just partially match Thomas. It's a full match to Harold Brantley. Rachel's breath caught. The father. Yes, but there's more. The sample under Janet's nails had a secondary contributor. A mix. We ran it again. He paused, voice heavy with what came next. It's a combined profile. Harold and Thomas. Both were there that night. Rachel felt the world tilt. Father and son. Both. The truth unfolded like a nightmare. Harold Brantley, the neighbor who everyone thought was harmless, had been having an affair with Janet Couture. Thomas, 16 and unstable, had found out. Jealousy. Rage. A confrontation that turned violent. Janet had tried to end things with Harold. Thomas showed up. An argument turned to chaos. And somewhere in that chaos, Janet died. They'd cleaned it up together. A pact sealed in blood and silence. A secret buried for decades. When Rachel read the final report, she just sat in her office, staring out at the rain. So many years. So much time wasted chasing shadows. And all along, the killers were right there, 2 houses down. The press later called it a murder solved too late. Harold was dead. Thomas couldn't be tried. Not enough evidence, too much decay. Too many years between truth and justice. Still, Rachel found herself visiting Janet's grave one evening. She left a single white rose. For you, she whispered. It's over now. But even as she turned to leave, she knew it wasn't really over. Because the Brantleys weren't the only ones who'd buried secrets that year. And in this quiet New England town, ghosts never really stayed buried. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. It came down in slow, steady sheets, like the sky was still weeping for Janet Couture. Detective Rachel Moore sat in her car, staring out at the cemetery. Her engine idled. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. She watched the water trickle down the windshield, blurring the world outside into gray shadows and crooked crosses. Janet's grave was a small patch of earth under a leafless maple tree. No family came here anymore. No visitors. Just a weathered stone. The words "forever loved," "forever missed," etched into silence. Rachel exhaled, the air fogging the glass. The case was closed. The truth was known. But why didn't it feel like justice? It had been 2 weeks since the DNA results broke the story wide open. Local headlines screamed the news. Cold case solved after 25 years. Father and son linked to murder of local woman. The town of Millbrook, Vermont, was buzzing. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. And everyone, it seemed, had known something all along. The Brantley house, once quiet and unremarkable, now stood abandoned. Its windows boarded, its yard overgrown. But Rachel noticed how the neighbors slowed when they passed it. Some left flowers, others stones. Guilt had a way of spreading like mold. That afternoon, she met with the district attorney. He was an older man, gray-haired, polished, exhausted. "We can't prosecute a dead man," he said flatly, sliding a report across his desk. "And the son, Thomas, there's not enough left to make it stick." Rachel nodded. She already knew, but hearing it aloud still hurt. "What about the confession?" she asked. "The DA side. He didn't confess. He just broke, but not enough to put it in writing." Rachel rubbed her temples. "So he walks free." The DA's voice softened. "He walks haunted, detective, and sometimes that's worse than prison." She didn't answer, because she wasn't sure he was right. That night, Rachel drove back to Millbrook. The streets were slick with rain, the lamplight stretching across puddles like liquid gold. As she passed the old Brantley property, something caught her eye, a faint flicker inside. A light, moving. She stopped, cut the engine, listened. Wind howled through the trees, rattling the old fence. But then, there it was again, a shadow passing across a cracked window. Her instincts kicked in. Gun at her side, flashlight in hand, she stepped out into the rain. The ground squelched beneath her boots as she approached the porch. The door creaked open. Inside, dust and darkness swallowed the air. The faint smell of mildew, wet wood, and something older, like time itself had rotted in here. "Police!" Rachel called out. "Who's there?" No answer. Just the steady drip of water through the broken roof. She moved down the hall, beams slicing through shadows. Old family photos lined the walls. Harold and his son, smiling in summer light, unaware that decades later they'd become monsters in the public eye. Then she saw it. The living room, a flickering candle on the floor, and beside it a small wooden box. Rachel knelt, heart thudding. The box was open. Inside, old letters, photographs, and a worn cassette tape. Back at the station, she fed the tape into the player. A hiss of static filled the room. Then a voice. "Thomas Brantley. If you're hearing this, it means you finally figured it out. Congratulations. Took you long enough." Pause. "You think my father was the monster. Maybe he was. But you don't know everything." Another pause. A deep, shaky breath. "He told me she wanted to end it. Said she was going to tell my mother. But my mother was already gone. She left years before. He lied. He always lied. That night, I went to her house to tell her to stop seeing him, to leave us alone. She wouldn't listen. She said she pitied me, that I needed help. Then he came in. He was drunk, angry. He shoved her. I tried to stop him, but she hit me first. Everything blurred. I heard her scream. Then, static crackles. A chair creaks. We both did it. We both killed her. And we buried the truth together." The tape clicked off. Rachel sat frozen. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Thomas hadn't confessed to one murder. He'd confessed to two. Because in that moment it became clear, he hadn't just buried Janet. He'd buried himself. The next morning, they found Thomas Brantley's body near the edge of the canal. Gunshot wound to the head. A revolver beside him. No note, but on his wrist, a silver bracelet tarnished with age. Engraved with the initials JC. Rachel stared at it in silence. He'd carried her name for 25 years. His punishment had always been with him. Days passed, then weeks. Life somehow went on. The news cycle moved to another scandal, another crime, another tragedy. But Millbrook didn't forget. The story of Janet Couture became part of its soil, retold in whispers, in warning, in mourning. And Rachel, she couldn't shake it. The sound of that tape, the voice of a man who'd been both victim and villain. She started visiting Janet's grave more often. Sometimes she spoke, sometimes she didn't. One day she found a single rose already there, fresh, dew still on the petals. She looked around. No one, only the wind. Later that evening, she received a letter. No return address, just her name, handwritten in trembling ink. Inside a photo, Janet, Harold, and Thomas, smiling. A family barbecue, maybe from before everything fell apart. And on the back, scrawled in uneven handwriting, "The town always knew, they just didn't want to see." Rachel stared at it for a long time, because deep down, she knew it was true. People had seen the signs, heard the arguments, noticed the bruises, but they'd all turned away, not out of malice, out of fear, out of comfort, because sometimes silence feels safer than truth. That night, as she drove through Millbrook, she saw the canal glimmer in the moonlight. The same canal where they'd found Janet's body so many years ago. The same one where Thomas had ended his life. She stopped her car, rolled down the window, listened. The water rippled softly, whispering against the rocks. It almost sounded like a voice, like Janet's voice. "It's over now," Rachel exhaled, eyes glistening. "No," she whispered, "it's just begun." Because for every case that closes, another one waits in the dark. Another victim, another secret, and somewhere someone else is still keeping quiet. She turned the key, headlights slicing through the mist. As she drove away, the reflection of her taillights shimmered across the black water. Red streaks in a pool of memory. The rain began again, soft and relentless, cleansing the streets, washing away the last traces of the Brantleys, of Janet, of everything that had rotted beneath the surface of this town. But Rachel knew better. You can't wash away what's been burned into the earth. Some ghosts stay, some stories never end, and some truths. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.